竟然是我。
哎，我说呢，Danny White，我还说新来一个专家。OK，
新来一专家。
那行，Danny，好的。那个我会录一个，我录一个外录的，然后再内录一个，just in case。对，
你就直接用 Zoom 就可以录啊。你
不
让他那个，你就用那个 presentation 的那个模式，让他对他独立在屏幕上就行。
对，可以。好的，他还没来，得稍等吧。
嗯
那个王律师来不来？我不知道啊。
不知道，没事儿，你先采访吧，咱们先采访吧。
嗯
哎呀，写到这儿就是，我现在在想的有好几个困惑的问题，
嗯，
时间节点都对不上，不同的文章写的时间节点都不一样，
哦，你说的是那个
好
Facebook，
几个
你想
好几个问，
捋一个时间线出来是吧？
理不出来，理的乱七八糟的。
哦，那你就模糊一点，不用搞得这么精确了。
对，
嗯，反正
我倒觉得现在有一个点哈，现在，哎，
嗯，
你现在要准备吗？你要准备你就
不用
先准备你的问题。
不用不用，我不用，我问题挺多，我只是想听一下他说了，再听他讲，我再调整一下，可能不用问那么多的。嗯
你就记得一定让他讲出来，当时做这个裁决依据是什么？他
嗯
裁决这个协议盾保护协议盾无效，其中他们的文章写的依据就是觉得美国的这个什么情报这个什么什么什么，我觉得这个让他说出来，一定要说出来，否则的话引不出我们后面
啊，
能
对，
能够说的这个监听监控的这个事儿，要不然这个文章就
我在想是不是可以问到他，他有没有？我其实想问他，是不是觉得这个美国的这个法律是不是有一种长臂管辖的一个嫌疑？我想让他判断一下。嗯，他
哪个法律长臂管辖？
就是说，他这个法律会不会有这个，
哪个法律？你
就是
指的哪个？
这个叫什么 Surveillance Act？哦，其实那个 Cloud Act 也有这个，就是
不是两回事儿啊，静南，我觉得你就是先要问他那个裁定的依据，
嗯
欧盟做出这样判断的那个裁定的依据，先
嗯
让他完整的说了啊，然后你再问，如果他有的话，可以再问他们说的那个什么情报，美国什么监听，我看看他是怎么说的那个，美国外国情报监视法嘛
嗯
，FISA 就那个 FISA
嗯
啊。
嗯
对这个，他应该能说到这个702条的这个东西啊。
嗯
至于是不是长臂管辖这个东西倒，他不说，他也是长臂管辖，就让他说你
嗯
想问就问吧。但是我
嗯，
觉得先把这个要问到，嗯
因为在你说那个云法案，其实微软有当时不想就想他就不想提供那个数据给到美国政府，后来就跟政府打官司打了半天。
嗯
2018年3月23号成庭，
嗯，
就是这个。
哎呀，我觉得这个实在是太庞杂了，这个信息和点，
嗯，
这个我到现在我就写了个开头，一直在捋，一直在捋不顺。
真是不容易，真是体会到了主笔的痛苦。
没有，我觉得是这个时间太短了。如果你这个如果给个1个多星期的时间，自己吃透了，弄明白了，也就
嗯，
好写了。
对，
现在自己还是一
来了
一团浆糊。
来了，等一下。
来了，OK。
Frank。
Hello.
Hi, Frank.
Yes, you're Julie.
Amy.
How are you doing?
Hi, nice to see you. Thank you for your time to join us. Um, yeah,
You're
I'm Julie, and Danny is my colleague. He is in charge of writing that article. I will help him to do this interview. But if he feel anything he would like to add on later, he will ask you. Okay.
All right.
Hello, Frank.
Hey, Danny, how are you?
I hope we can finish it within 40 minutes. But if we need to extend, because this is for beyond 3 persons, so that Zoom will end automatically after 40 minutes. So then we will log in again. We have to. If
30
just in
minutes?
case, just in
30
case.
minutes?
I think we can finish it before, but just in case, I let you know. Yeah,
Okay.
right. So we know the Ireland's data protection watchdog, the DCP, has sent Facebook a preliminary order to suspend data transfer from the EU to the US, and Facebook appealed on September 15. So I'd like to you help us to analyze what DCP's preliminary order was based on. Do you think it's reasonable?
Well, I thought we were. I thought actually that we were going to be talking about the Schrems judgment of the European Supreme Court. I'll be honest with you. I did not look at this order coming out of the Irish Data Protection Authority.
Oh, so all right. So, but in your newsletter, you analyzed you analyzed something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I analyzed the European Court judgment, which then sent the matter back to the High Court in Ireland, which after that, I don't know what happened to this case. I wasn't aware of any subsequent decision that had been taken yet. But I assume the result of the High Court or Data Protection Authority would have been to stop the data flow from Ireland to the U.S. because that's what the court effectively was saying.
Mm-hmm. Does it mean that Europe's top court ruling in this amount the data transfer arrangement between EU and US is kind of a doubt on the security of data under US surveillance law?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what this thing is all about. It's putting a lot of uncertainty into at the moment the EU-US data protection regimes, and the effect of the case was, first of all, to throw in doubt the privacy shield, which existed between the EU and US. That was an adequacy decision that was reached, and it also threw into question the validity of standard contractual clauses, which might be entered into between the data processor and the controller, the people who own the data. So both of those things came under severe attack, if you want, in the ECJ decision from July. I mean, I imagine your interest in this is understanding, well, how does this affect Chinese companies doing business in the EU? Would that be a fair?
Yeah, I will ask you the Chinese company later, but
right.
let me just focus on the Facebook case. Does the court also cast a doubt on the standard? Even Facebook used SEC standard contractual clauses used by Facebook. They doubt Facebook can provide plenty of protection for the customer's information and privacy.
Well, that's right, because whether you're talking about the privacy shield or contractual clauses, the problem lies in the fact that the EU person's data in the United States can be obtained on a massive scale by the National Security Agency or the FBI or both. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. So that regardless of the promises that are made in these standard contractual clauses, effectively the data importer in the United States must give up the data if the government authority asks them to. The protections that are available are simply deemed by the court to be insufficient. They're incompatible with GDPR.
So can you just specifically, you have a comment here on the section 702 of the FISA. Can you analyze that? I'm not very, I'm not an expert on this, so would like to hear what you say.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because you mentioned that this section, the court found it failed to indicate any limitation on the power it confers to implement surveillance programs for the purpose of foreign intelligence.
Yeah, that's it. This is a direct quote from the court judgment.
Right. So what does it implicate for the company? So for the non-ordinary customers, what does it mean for them?
Yeah. So what the court is saying is that the FISA and specifically Section 702 does not contain any limitations on surveillance of non-U.S. persons targeted by these programs. Non-U.S. persons, so EU citizens, for example, can be targeted without any real limitations.
So does it mean if only the surveillance department they feel is necessary, then they can get the data from the company, from the commercial?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, from Facebook. Exactly.
Do they have any criteria to say, like in the Cloud Act, they say they need to see a qualified government, something like that?
Well, the Cloud Act, the cloud legislation came in 2018. This was after Schrems brought his action against Facebook. And that's why the Cloud Act was not even discussed in the court judgment. It wasn't part of that lawsuit. Okay? That's the reason why there's no reference in this judgment to cloud.
Right. So can you introduce the background, the Cloud Act, and the relationship with the GDPR? What's the difference between them? And then I will ask you follow the question later.
All right. So the Cloud Act this enables bilateral surveillance involving the parties who are signing it, so that a country on request of another country will obtain surveillance of its own citizens. That's the whole idea. It is a tighter regime than FISA. It does require something like probable cause to conduct one of these searches, and there is some sort of judicial remedy, so that cloud I think is a safer bet than FISA in terms of protecting EU citizens, let's say. But it's untested. We don't know what the court would do with regard to cloud. I've read some articles suggesting that cloud could be similarly attacked as offering insufficient protection in terms of data which is transferred from the EU to the US.
So what's the connection between the FISA and cloud? Is it based on the FISA and then the Cloud Act, or can you tell me?
They're separate. These are separate pieces of legislation. I mean, FISA is aimed at terrorism. I mean, the FISA came into existence after the 9/11 attacks. So the initial motivation to adopt FISA was to go after various elements of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, that sort of thing, right?
Mhm.
Whereas cloud is simply a law enforcement device. It's not specifically aimed at terrorists or people suspected of terrorism.
Mhm. Does it mean the US government can use either FISA or Cloud Act to get the data from abroad?
The the FISA, first of all, doesn't have any restrictions. so basically,
Why?
it's much. There's very little oversight involving FISA, and involving cloud. You have to go to a judge. You have to show a good reason to target. It's not involving massive a massive data collection. It's involving targeted data that you might want to obtain. So the concept is different. It's not the same, and it's unclear whether after Schrems, cloud would have the same fate that FISA does in terms of being deemed incompatible with GDPR. I'm not sure how that would come out because it's somewhere in between in terms of protections, in terms of the protections.
So, in your newsletter, you say U.S. government used FISA to get some information actually unnecessary, maybe, and then the right of the customer will be infringed.
That was Schrems's concern. As an Irish citizen, or he's actually Austrian, it was that his Facebook account, which I guess was based in Ireland, would be compromised by U.S. law enforcement in the form of NSA, National Security Agency, or FBI, when his data was transferred from Facebook Ireland to the U.S.
So do you think, as someone said, it's U.S. government use long-arm jurisdiction over the vast majority of internet data? Do you agree?
I'm sorry, what about long-arm jurisdiction?
Yeah, because some people thought it's kind of U.S. government, they use their position as kind of
Yeah. Okay. It is sort of a virtual. It is sort of a virtual long-arm jurisdiction.
Oh, so you.
But keep in mind that what happened. That in the Facebook case, it was not data in Europe that was obtained by the U.S. authorities. That isn't what happened, and that isn't what Schrems was concerned about. What he was concerned about was that Facebook in Ireland was transferring his data to Facebook in the States, and then from there, FISA would demand Facebook to give these agencies his U.S. information.
So you believe it's a long-arm jurisdiction?
It is in a way. Was he present in the United States? No. His data was present in the United States.
All right.
You see the difference. So there was no indication. There was no indication that his data was obtained by the NSA or by any federal agency. He was simply saying that it was possible. It was possible that an agency of that kind would ask Facebook in the States for his data, and Facebook would have no choice but to give it up. That was the issue. That potentially that data could be discovered by a federal agency that could, investigate him. Even though he's a lawyer, he's an Austrian lawyer. I mean, he's not a Assange or something like this, dealing with WikiLeaks and subject to all kinds of allegations in the United States. There's nothing there involving him. There is nothing there. He is simply somebody trying to attack Facebook.
So, do you think European people feel quite naked before a U.S. agency? Because you won't have a secret from them. Because they can.
You're asking me whether Americans are.
I mean, European people will feel their data in the hand of the U.S. government. Do you have that?
Oh, I don't know about that. Okay, I'll give you, Julie, my honest opinion about these sorts of things, and that I don't think Europeans generally care one way or the other. GDPR, as far as even it's something I practice, right? I advise companies on GDPR. My impression is that when they receive a request to give permission for cookies and tracking devices and everything else, nobody thinks twice about this. It's a nuisance to have to deal with all these incoming messages all the time. Do you consent? Do you not consent? I mean, you know, you get no access to the underlying content unless you consent. And I think most people do without even thinking about it. I think the situation involving GDPR and the United States is the concerns there. I think the concern is more about Facebook than it is the United States enforcement agencies, law enforcement agencies. I think to the extent to which the ordinary EU citizen cares about this judgment, it's only with regard to this showing, once again, how their data on Facebook is unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I think that's really the takeaway for the average EU citizen.
Okay.
Who was already worried that Facebook was selling their data to everybody who wants it. And they, of course, don't get anything from this. They own their data, but they're actually giving it away to Facebook. And Facebook then makes a profit from the sale of it and manipulation of it and everything else. So I think the average citizen, if he cares about this judgment, that's why he cares about it.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think the German impression on the Marcos was spied?
I'm sorry, please repeat.
Yeah, I mean the Marcos was spied, and do you think how German people think about that?
About Merkel?
Yeah, Merkel was 白老师，你知道那个事情吗？
I'm not
知道
sure.
他被监听的事情。
Yeah, the Chancellor Merkel was spied by what's that? Yeah, so I need to check it. Okay, let's put it later. Okay, I just follow the question.
All right.
So, do you think how great influence of the U.S. companies on the EU in this data protection area? I mean, do European people think the data already monopolized by the U.S. companies? They can do anything, manipulate it, or just like they think take it as.
Yeah, I think there's a real concern that companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, that their data is being used in all kinds of ways. I think there is that concern. There are other concerns too, I'm sure that you're aware of, involving misinformation and that sort of thing. But as far as data is concerned, I think in Europe there is a greater consciousness about privacy than in the States, and there's a reason for that, and that is that Europe has its history with the Nazis during World War II, and then the Cold War, in Poland, Hungary, and all these other countries in the East where they were spied on. East Germany as well, of course, before the wall came down, was an authoritarian authoritarian regime, where individuals had no safety in terms of their data. So these were the concerns, I think, that carry over decades later, and led this GDPR initiative.
Some people ask why U.S., the European people are more afraid of rather than, for example, China. If the similar things happen, for example, the company based in Europe, but the headquarters in Beijing, if they did transfer the data from Europe to China, would they have a similar fear or afraid of it? Or
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question. Let me just say that a lot of Europeans have not been to China. They have no intention of going to China. They would travel obviously within Europe. Maybe they go to Africa. They go to the United States. China, there's obviously everybody has a short list of places they want to go, and there's so much to see and visit in this part of the world that I think China would be not quite at the top of people's list. So, what would be their fear about the Chinese having this data? What are the Chinese going to do to them from China? I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty remote. Now, in my article, I suggested that there could be a problem with some people. I don't know how many. If they were asked for their consent, because I'm backing up now into a bigger discussion of adequacy. There is no adequacy decision between of the EU relating to data transfers to China. You know that already. And I think the concerns that the court had in Schrems with regard to standard contractual clauses would apply just as much to China as they would to the United States. So that means that legally for data, personal data, to transfer from the EU to China would probably involve one of the derogations in Article 49 of GDPR. And the best one is just simply get the guy's consent. To transfer, get the guy's consent. But in a way, that could, in some cases, be tricky, because all it would take is somebody like Schrems, or somebody who left China and who has a grudge, to point out in the European media, well, here's what could happen to your data in China.
Right.
And then you have this fear that whether it's real, unreal, I mean, who's to say? But then suddenly people here are thinking, do I want to give my consent for my data to go to China? Maybe. It's a possible scenario. So I do think, as I suggested in this memo that you read, that it's safer for both US companies and Chinese companies either to keep the data in Europe and not transfer it, so you set up a data center here, or the data is transferred to a country that does have an adequacy decision with the EU, like Japan or New Zealand. So at least for Chinese companies, Japan is not that far away. And then I think those concerns would go away. And then you would not need to ask the individual consumer over here whether he consents to his data being transferred to China. Keep in mind that every person, every consumer of a Chinese product who's asked that question, if he doesn't want the data transferred to China, that could be a decision on whether he's going to buy the product or not.
Yeah, that's a question. For TikTok, it's similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
If
But of course, but the situation with TikTok, the owners of TikTok have been saying for months that the data is not transferred to China. Obviously, the United States doesn't trust that. And that's why you've had this business about Trump wanting ByteDance to sell TikTok, or the US will just close it down in the States. You haven't seen that over here. That's a US issue. I think the Europeans tend to believe ByteDance that, okay, we don't have to go crazy with this. The product was not even developed for the Chinese market. So we had no reason to believe that the data is being transferred to China. So why do we have to start thinking this way? So, but that would, but you are suggesting a scenario for other companies. Just create a platform where the data can be deposited, and make sure that it's not violated. Otherwise, what I fear is that Chinese companies, like US companies, will have to be asking the consent of the consumer to their taking the personal data and bringing it back to the US or to China, as the case may be.
I think here, for a company, you said if they set the data center in non-US or non-China, right, the other territory area. So this is one solution. The other solution is consent between the customer and the company according to GDPR. But the thing is, if the surveillance, the security department, they asked, no matter you have a consent between the customer and the company, would that still happen?
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
I mean, if there is a consent between the customer and the company, but the security government, the security department, under the surveillance law, they ask for the data. Does the company still need to provide that data to them, even the customer doesn't?
Yeah. Well, hang on. The consent between the company and the individual would have to say, you're giving us permission to transfer this data from the EU to let us say China. Okay, I think that the consent policy that is then shared with the individual would have to say something about what does that mean. that the company in China, upon request, would have to submit that data to certain Chinese agencies, or any Chinese agency, upon request. I mean, you don't necessarily have to give up everything. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't even know yourself, if you're a Chinese company, who you would have to give this data to until the moment arrives when you get a telephone call or a letter saying we want the data on this person, for example, right? So you don't have to indicate every possible scenario in the consent policy. But I think to be fair to the consumer, the Chinese company, of course, this is stated in very legalistic terms, that you are consenting to our use and transfer of the data to China, and that there and that we will do our best to maintain the security of this data. We do not intend to sell it to third parties, or maybe you do. And if you do, you say so in the policy. And maybe you say there may be certain instances where we have to share the data with certain federal agencies, and by your consent, you're also agreeing to that. That's it.
Yeah.
It's
So
done.
the
It's
problem
done.
for the customer is like if you don't to agree with the being used data, and then you can't enjoy the service or the products, they won't provide anything for you. You can reject, but you can't use anything. So that means you don't have trust if you would like to use their service, isn't it?
Well, this is the issue that I was saying, that before or after the purchase of the product, your lack of consent could destroy the transaction. So let's say that, I mean, this is something that I actually did deal with, a Chinese vehicle manufacturer selling the vehicles here in Europe. The vehicle would come with a GPS. The GPS and had other software which would tell the mother company in China where the vehicle was located, whether it was safe to drive, even because there was some diagnostic information that went through the computer in the vehicle back to the mother company, right? And the actual software, the GPS, would not even work, obviously, unless you consented to your data going to the mother company.
Yeah.
So you could imagine a situation where you bought the vehicle, and then you get by email the data privacy policy that activates the software only when you give your consent. So what happens if the person reads that policy and says, well, I paid 2,000 whatever, 5,000 euros for this product, and now I can't use I don't want to give my data to these people. I thought the GPS was just going to work magically. He doesn't think about where the data is going, right? He has no idea where the data is going. He only finds out about where the data is going when he receives the policy.
All right, Frank, thank you. My colleague, Danny, will I ask you some question?
Okay.
Hi, Frank.
Hey there.
Thank you for joining us.
How's it going?
Yeah. Sorry about this. I can't open my video. Something problem with my computer. Okay. My first question is, someone told me the GDPR is more like a shield, and the Cloud Act, the U.S. government, the Cloud Act is more like a spear. So what's your,
like what? I'm sorry.
Like a spear and shield, you know. So what's your thoughts? Do you think so?
Yeah, the FISA. Remember, FISA is not a treaty between the U.S. and other countries. FISA is domestic U.S. legislation. Okay, whereas the Cloud Act is a way of obtaining consensus between the EU and other countries to allow for data sharing to be used in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's the Cloud Act. I mean, the GDPR. People said it's more like a shield, and the Cloud Act is more like a spear. So.
Well, the Cloud Act is also U.S. legislation. Let's be clear. But the whole idea behind the Cloud Act is that other countries do the same thing. Other countries do the same thing, so that they can then be asking each other for data relating to the people who they can collect the data from. And the purpose is not anti-terrorism. It's international criminality of all kinds.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's what the purpose is. It enables a foreign country to spy, if you want, on the U.S.'s behalf. And in a similar manner, for example, the UK the U.S. rather spy on the UK's behalf. So it's a little bit different. And like I was explaining to Julie at the beginning, there are protections in the Cloud Act which don't exist in FISA.
Yeah. So because the Facebook case, they based on the FISA rather than cloud, isn't it?
Right, and that's because yes, and that's because, and the only reason for that, I think, the only reason, well, there could be several reasons. Okay, one is I really do think Schrems was after Facebook, and the other, but actually, to be honest with you, I take that back. The only reason why he would have gone after cloud if he could, because his whole objective was to prevent data transfer by Facebook. That was his objective. So whether he did that with FISA or whether he did it with the Cloud Act, it would have been the same thing. He would have gone after cloud if cloud existed when he brought his action in Ireland. And it was too late. I mean, the Cloud Act was adopted in 2018. So it's way later. You know, Schrems, let me see. He initially brought his complaint in like the year 2000. So I mean, this thing has been around for a while.
So actually, his right already has been infringed before Cloud Act was introduced, right?
Let me just see here. He one moment. Hang on a second.
I'm afraid we have to log in again because I saw it only have 2 minutes left, and then
yeah. Look, I don't think he brought this action in 2000. It was much later than that. It was probably 2000. I'm guessing 2015 or so. Let me see here. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, 差不多吧。静楠，你还有问题吗？
So do you mind to log in again? I will ask you another one generally about the other cases, okay? So we just have 1 minute. I don't think we can finish that. So can we log on, finish this meeting and then we log in again? Thank you for your time.
Okay.